Well, some state Republicans are pushing for the Bible to be used in Idaho schools.
That hot topic, and why you probably haven't seen your kids' SBAC test scores. We're covering it all with Idaho Education News reporter Kevin Richard in tonight's Making the Grade. Kevin's back with Making the Grade. Let's start with a topic we discussed last week, which is where are the missing test scores, SBAC scores, for a lot of students all over the valley, nowhere to be found.
Still kind of on hold, and the more we dig into the story, the more we find that there are other delays. There are delays in some of the math scores that are coming in. And where this kind of hits the road for parents and for school districts, we're hearing about this now in Boise. Boise is waiting for all of their results, and once they have all the results in hand, then they will mail the test scores to parents. So parents can actually see how their kids did.
We want to know those kinds of things. Teachers want to know.
Parents would like to know that, I'm sure. And what this means for the Boise School District is they're figuring it's going to cost about $10,000 plus staff time to put these test results in the mail to get them out to parents.
And the test results for the SBAC were supposed to be to the school districts how many days after?
Well, right. I mean, the tests were taken from the end of March to May 22nd, and the plan was that the results were going to be back to the state within 10 days, between 10 business days. So we're 3 weeks out from that now, just about.
And no end in sight necessarily.
And they're now saying, the state is now saying they could have the results all collected in hand by next week.
All right, we'll check back in then, see what happens. Interesting story you guys were reporting on about the GOP, a committee of the Republican Party, talking about bringing religion and specifically the Bible into classrooms. Tell me a little bit about that story.
Okay, so this was the Republican Central Committee. They were meeting in Idaho Falls last weekend, and what the Central Committee did, they passed a resolution that would urge legislators to look at allowing the Bible to be used in school. The resolution steers clear of saying that the Bible should be used as a religious text or that it's a way to get religion into public schools. That the Bible would be used for as a historical document, for other educational purposes not related to religion. To put it in context, this is a fairly small group, the Central Committee. Passed on a 12-3 vote. It's not binding, and what basically happens is that this urges legislators to do this. Way too early to tell if any legislator is actually going to take up the idea, and if so, what kind of traction, if any, that would have at the legislature.
Fascinating that it's starting at this point, though. We'll follow that story.
Mm-hmm.
So you've also done a story about a profile piece on Mike Rush, who's the executive director of the State Board of Education, who is leaving at the end of the month. What is happening with his job position? This is a high-profile job with a big paycheck attached to it.
Yes, it's a high-profile job, and it's kind of the administrative end of what the State Board does. The State Board is governed by 8 people, the state superintendent who's elected by the people, and 7 gubernatorial appointees. But the executive director, he or she is the administrative arm of the State Board. And Mike Rush, who's had that job for 8 years, has been in place. He's been been with the State Board in various functions for 29 years, so he's got a lot of institutional memory that really kind of predates the appointees on the board. Anyway, he's leaving at the end of the month to take a job in South Dakota. The State Board hopes to have a successor in place within the next couple of weeks. Like you say, it's a 6-figure job. It's a high-profile, highly paid administrative job. We're not going to get to see much about the application process. The applications are closed off from the public records law. We'll get a list of finalists' names when we get further along into that process. So it's a very quick process, it's a very quiet process, but we'll try to watch it as closely as we can.
And see who that next person is going to be. Really fast before we go, neat story that was posted on idahoednews.org. Tell me a little bit about this student who had a perfect ACT score. I can't imagine.
These kids, you read their stories and you feel like a total underachiever. Yes, he's a Boise High School student, and yes, he scored a 36, the perfect score on the ACT. Really interesting story. This kid is very driven, very dedicated to his studies. Hopes to attend Stanford after graduation. As you would expect, he's got high aspirations, but a very interesting profile, definitely worth checking out.
So you can see that at idahoednews.org. By the way, his mother's comments in that story I loved. So check it out on the website. Kevin, thanks for being here for Making the Grade.
Thank you.